Thank you for joining us today. We've got several great speakers for you. Starting us off today will be Amy Powell. Amy's been with Iowa State University for 6 years, and her current role is the Extension Youth Animal Science Program Specialist. Following Amy will be Dr. Andrew Henenfent. Dr. Henenfent works for the Iowa Department of Ag and Land Stewardship, often referred to as IDALS here in the state. He's been with them for about a year and a half, serving in the role as the Emergency Management Coordinator for Animal Health. Our main speaker will be Dr. Molly Lee, an Associate Director at the Center for Food Security and Public Health at Iowa State. Before we get started, I just want to acknowledge that this training program for Iowa County Youth Coordinators was funded by USDA's Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service through the National Animal Disease Preparedness and Response Program. So without further ado, Amy Powell.
Thank you, Danelle. As she mentioned, I am Amy Powell, and I just want to thank you all for joining us today. This is a very timely and important topic for all of us to educate our youth and the general public on the concepts of biosecurity and keeping our youth safe, our animals safe, and the general public safe. If you have questions or concerns about how you can implement this into your 4-H program, whether it be through a 4-H club meeting, a project group meeting, an online or virtual class, or even day camps, I'm happy to help you facilitate that and figure out where it can best fit in your 4-H programs. Also on the call today is Mr. Aaron Fisher, and he's kind of my counterpart in Tennessee. So for those Tennessee folks that are on the call, you can also reach out to him, and I'm sure he can help facilitate that type of learning with you. And if you have questions about the program as a whole, then Dr. Lee is the person to reach out to. And I really appreciate Iowa State's Center for Food Security and Public Health for reaching out to 4-H specifically and joining in this great partnership to help disseminate all of this information. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Henenfent.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me talk today. I'll just talk to you a little bit about the importance of biosecurity and why it's so important to get this ingrained into our youth, especially to help kind of move agriculture forward and help keep everything sustainable. I'm Dr. Andrew Henenfent from the Iowa Department of Agriculture and Land Stewardship, and as Danelle said, I've been with the department for about a year and a half. My primary duties are focusing on foreign animal disease prevention and just ways that we can strengthen agriculture across the state. So I'll just do a brief overview of why agriculture is important to Iowa and why getting our youth that strong foundation and understanding biosecurity to protect themselves, the people seeing their animals, as well as the animals and the farming practice in itself is highly, highly important. So as most people on the call know that in the U.S., Iowa is the #1 corn producer, #1 soybean producer, #1 egg producer, and #1 pig producer. This is what I'm going to establish is just how closely connected all these different industries and commodities are and the importance that they play for our state's economy as well as for its well-being. And we're the highest second food producing state in the country, accounting for over a third of the U.S. pork supply, corn supply, soybeans, eggs, and cattle. So it's very, very much rooted in our Iowa tradition. And then to think that none of these are happening on an island, about a quarter of the corn and soybeans raised in Iowa are fed to our pigs here in Iowa. So they're very, very interlinked relationships. So what affects one market will affect the others. So if we don't have good biosecurity on our farms in Iowa and we face an issue that impacts our livestock sector, it will directly impact our crop sectors as well. And not only will this just the interdependence of the sectors within Iowa, but also the international market as well. So we have to, and as we've seen with how quickly disease can spread in this day and age across international boundaries, not only implications for disease spread, but also economics. For the entire U.S. agriculture sector, about 15% of our beef is exported internationally, 20% dairy, 30% pork, and about 20% poultry and eggs. What we do on an individual farm level not only has impacts on the entire state, but can have reaching international impacts as well. So we really, really want to stress that everyone has their part to play to protect not only their farm, but the state, as well as our nation's agriculture supply. And I've kind of been stressing this already, but the interdependence of all these different industries and commodities on each other is definitely an apple cart that can be easily tipped over, as we've seen with what's been happening with the disruption in the market chain from slaughter plants having to decrease capacity due to COVID concerns. And the number one thing that can throw off this fine-tuned balance is what I'll label this guy here as is poor on-farm biosecurity. So that's really, really why we want to stress to our youth the importance of practicing good biosecurity when they're going to shows, dealing with their own animals, having visitors on their farm, everything along those lines. Because it just takes one misstep in the chain and the whole cart can be tipped over, and we can start that cascade that can negatively impact not only the entire state, but potentially our trade routes as well. I'll turn it over to Dr. Lee now, but I want to thank you guys so much for your time today. As always, feel free to reach out to the Department of Agriculture for anything that your groups may need now or in the future.
Thank you so much, Danelle, for your introduction, and for Amy and Andrew for you guys providing that background and support for this project as well. As Danelle said, I am one of the associate directors here at the Center for Food Security and Public Health over at the Vet School at Iowa State. And here we and I work on a variety of projects related to disease prevention, biosecurity, foreign animal disease preparedness and response, some international veterinary education projects. But one of my very favorite projects to work on is the one that I'll be speaking with you about today. So it's a really fun and rewarding thing to be able to teach our youth and engage them with these topics. So without further ado, I will go ahead and get started. So like any good educator, I've put together a few learning objectives for today. So by the end of this webinar, you will be able to outline the learning goals and objectives associated with our online courses called Bring Home the Blue, Not the Flu, and be aware of examples of content from those lessons. You'll be able to perform hands-on activities and lead students in doing so related to disease prevention and relate these back to the corresponding content within the online courses. You'll also be able to locate the different resources that are available on our course website. And then finally, and most importantly, design a program using these available resources to hold a youth workshop in your area. To give you guys a little bit of background on how this project started, some of you probably already know a little bit about H3N2, which is a strain of influenza A, and that is fairly common to circulate among swine. It also can infect humans, and when an influenza virus does infect humans, that's when that little V goes on the end of the name. And so you have H3N2V, which is a variant virus that infects people. So in 2011, there were a few sporadic cases of H3N2V in humans, and then in 2012, it kind of increased quite a bit more. So there were multiple outbreaks of H3N2V in 2012. And so that's kind of when all of this started coming together. And what's particularly important about those outbreaks is they occurred primarily in children with close contact and prolonged exposure to swine at agricultural fairs, and many of whom were exhibitors. So at that point, the CDC and the Council of State and Territorial Epidemiologists, or CSTE, funded a pilot project to develop influenza prevention education, as well as awareness and education about other zoonotic diseases among youth. And another goal of that project was to foster collaboration and partnership between animal health, human health, and state and county youth agriculture organizations. So that brings us to our project here in Iowa, and we were one of the early recipients of this pilot grant. So we started this work in 2016, and we're fortunate that the Iowa Department of Public Health contracted with us, the CFSPH, to work on this project due to our expertise in education about biosecurity and disease prevention. Our original target audience was that teen aged 13 to 18 years old, kind of the middle high school aged group who are involved in animal agriculture. And we particularly chose that age group because there was some data to show that web-based education really worked in that age group. So we wanted to develop something that was far-reaching and sustainable. And so that's what we did. We applied for this grant, and with that funding, offer the course free of charge. So that has further increased its potential reach. Since then, we've been fortunate to receive additional years of funding. So we've added a second course that's directed toward an elementary age audience, and developed a variety of other materials which you'll learn about in this webinar. Both of these courses are, as I said, free, very interactive, and they're also accessible and responsive. The first course, as I mentioned, is offered for 13 to 18-year-olds, and this course includes 6 lessons: Introduction to Influenza, Zoonoses and Disease Risks, Zoonotic Disease Transmission, Zoonotic Disease Prevention and Biosecurity, and then 2 different case studies, one on highly pathogenic avian influenza and one on influenza A virus of swine origin, that H3N2B again. And then our final lesson is on One Health agencies and careers. And each of these lessons is designed to be completed in about 20 to 30 minutes each. And you'll see our website repeated up there again, blueknotflu.org. And the courses are housed on this website. And so the course can be taken by anyone independently at any time. Again, it's free. You just visit the website, click on the course, and I'll show you guys all of this later. But, it's very, very accessible to anyone. So I wanted to kind of go through the lessons a little bit and show you what is being taught, what the different topics are, share with you the learning objectives, and kind of go through some of the most interesting or the focus of each lesson and some of those interactive activities. As you guys feel comfortable, hopefully after this training, rolling this out with youth in your county, it's important to have a good understanding of what's in here. So I'll spend quite a while here in the next part of the webinar going through the lessons and what's covered. So here, for the first lesson, you'll see youth will learn about zoonotic diseases, endemic diseases, and emerging diseases. And they'll be able to read through some interactive case files and identify some risk factors for those zoonotic diseases as well. So here I will show a video that navigates through some of the features of the online course and has some examples of content. So navigation's pretty straightforward. This is kind of a directions page at the very beginning of the course, and you can see how we'll have vocabulary words throughout. And when they're hovered over, the definitions are provided. Those all go into a glossary at the end of the lesson too, and that's populated and expanded after each lesson. So here's those case files that I mentioned, and there's an example of a vocabulary word again. And so it's a lot of clicking and interaction and trying to keep it interesting with these kids, lots of pictures and less words, but still some really good information. So in this example, you can see we've gone through background, species affected, clinical signs in animals, and symptoms in people for a couple different diseases, and that goes on for a few more. Some of the activities we have this one where you drag diseases to review zoonoses that commonly affect pigs. And I wanted to mention too that we give feedback on answers that aren't correct. So hopefully the user and the youth, as they're going through these activities, are learning even if they get an answer wrong. So again, the incorrect answer doesn't stay on the picture, and in most of our activities, they get real-time feedback on why something was or was not a correct choice. Our second lesson talks about disease transmission. So middle and high school students will learn about the different ways that disease can be transmitted between animals and people. The lesson works through and describes those 5 different routes of transmission. And how the lesson's kind of structured is, first there's an overview of the route of transmission, and then that follows by an example of different diseases that spread this way, and an example of a disease spreading in kind of a relatable story form, and then finally measures to prevent that route of disease spread. And then as we go through that lesson, one thing that is also happening is a graph is being built, and at the end, it shows how different diseases spread in different ways and how some diseases spread in multiple ways. So here I have an example of this at the end of the graph after all 5 routes have been discussed. And then we have a variety of other interactive activities too that allow the students to apply what they've learned. So for example, matching the route of transmission to their correct definition. We have some drag and drop names of different transmission routes to pictures that depict that route of spread. So that's kind of what's in lesson 2. Lesson 3 covers biosecurity and measures that students can take to prevent the spread of diseases. One of the interactive activities we have in this lesson allows students to put correct steps in order for cleaning and disinfecting their barn or pens. Students will also learn about the hierarchy of controls and steps to take to improve the biosecurity of their farms. And then a little later in this lesson, youth will be able to explore PPE and what to use when working with infected animals. So again, here I have a quick video clip, and this shows a little bit different kind of interactive activity where users can hover or tap instead of click and drag. And then here's that interactive activity that allows the students to put correct steps in order for cleaning and disinfecting their barns or pens. So, you know, pretty simple, but some of the, it breaks it up a little bit, makes sure that especially some of these simpler but very important concepts are reinforced. Again, you can see if the incorrect answer is attempted, then that doesn't stay on the picture, and hopefully the students get an opportunity to think about it and select their correct answer. And then again, we have a recap of what the right answers are. In this one, kids get to click on pictures where biosecurity practices could be most improved. And again, they just clicked on a good biosecurity practice and we said, no, actually that's a good one and this is why. So again, we try to have that feedback in real time. And then at the end of the lesson, students will participate in an interactive biosecurity game, kind of like Cards Against Humanity or Apples to Apples. So a question is asked and then the student needs to pick the card with the best answer on it. They don't always win, so you know, if they keep choosing incorrect cards, then player 2 might win, but they'll have an opportunity to try again, and in most cases, it's something that's definitely achievable and kind of engaging for the kids to do. Lesson 4 is based around a case study on avian influenza, like I mentioned before. So there's some background information and students will read through clues from an outbreak, answer questions about these clues that are presented in the case. Here, again, you can see one of the things that we have is a little bit of history of avian influenza, and especially for some of these high schoolers or middle schoolers, if they were raising poultry back in 2014 and 15, they'll probably remember some of this. So a little bit of a history lesson tied into why it's relevant, and then moving on, of course, for prevention strategies and how they can apply the information. Lesson 5, again, is another case study, but this one around swine. So similar to lesson 4, students will read through the clues from an outbreak, answer questions over these clues about the case. Again, there are many interactive multiple choice questions for students to answer. Yep, this one's another little short video. So these are just interactions, not recorded, not necessarily test questions, but you certainly could use it with kids if you wanted to do it in person or via a web training sort of thing. And then the final lesson, lesson 6, focuses on different careers in animal and public health. So middle and high school students will be able to learn about different agencies and hear from 6 different make-believe individuals about specific aspects of their career. So the lesson culminates in a fun kind of clue-like game. So students need to figure out what disease the people have, the animal that spread the disease, and the location where people were infected. So we kind of go through instructions, and it's hopefully pretty simple to play. I don't really know if kids play Clue anymore these days, but kind of a fun way to sum up a lot of the information that was in the prior lessons, as well as learn about careers that kids might do, and kind of put it all together to solve a case. So you can see that they just clicked on the physician, they had to answer a question, the physician then gave them information, and now in the case file, they can go and review that clue again. But the other careers that they haven't visited yet, they don't have that information because they didn't answer their quiz question before receiving the clue. I also want to point out that the course includes certificates, which, as we'll discuss later in the presentation, that can be very helpful in motivating and tracking students' completion of the content. So here you see the slide from the course that's under directions at the very beginning of the course and kind of describes how this works. So the students earn a badge on a certificate for each of the lessons completed. And then I wanted to point out too, this is on the bottom of this screen, but for students using Internet Explorer, they won't be able to print their certificate. So if that's something that students might be doing, and if printing certificates is important to your educational programming, that's something to be aware of. So once a student completes each lesson, a page similar to this appears, and students can type in their information, their name, their club or chapter, and what county they belong to. And then a customized certificate is populated and appears. And so they can print that out or screenshot it and email it. And so that thing in the middle that's blue, that's the badge that they've received for lesson 2, and it'll be a little different for each lesson. And then after they go through all the lessons, after lesson 6, they collect their individual certificate, and then moving on after that, the next slide is where students are asked to complete a survey on Google Forms, which I'll cover later in the presentation and why that piece is important too. But once they complete that survey, they can return back to their other tab and return to the course, and then they're able to collect their final certificate. And I want to mention too, if the students take the courses out of order, which they can, it works best from beginning to end since things do kind of build on one another. The first lesson is more of a background and definitions. And then of course that 6th lesson kind of puts it all together, but it's not absolutely necessary that they complete it beginning to end. So if they do take them out of order, they can collect the final certificate after they're all done by clicking that bottom right corner of the main menu. So then that 7th and final badge appears after the students complete the survey in Google Forms. And so if the student only completes some of the lessons, they'll only receive the badges for those lessons, and the remaining ones will be empty gray placeholders. So as you can see in this example, I've only completed lesson 2 and the final survey. So I got the 2nd badge and the 7th, but I'm missing all those other ones that are in gray. And I have a little message that reminds me I need to complete the rest of them if I want this final certificate. I also want to mention that if a student leaves the course and returns to it at a later time, the software that we use to create the course will save their spot. So even if they exit their browser, when they open it back up, the program will ask, do you want to resume where you left off? And so the course will remember what lessons were already completed, so students can retain their badges from the last time they accessed the course. And so if you or students are concerned about this, remember there's also those individual certificates that could be used to verify completion instead of the final certificate. I mentioned that we were able to receive funding again and develop a similar course for elementary age youth. And this one follows similar content as the middle and high school level course. Also has 6 lessons, and these lessons are called All About Germs, Signs of Sickness, How Germs Spread, Fight Germs, Biosecurity, Keep Germs Out, and What Went Wrong at the Fair. So as you can see, it's kind of similar content, but it's really been simplified and kind of adjusted to fit that younger audience of 7 to 12-year-olds or elementary age. There's a little bit more gamification, less text, a lower reading level, and shorter lessons. So to kind of recap what these are, and I realize I'm not giving you a ton of time to read through these learning objectives, but these are all available for you on the website and in the digital packet that you guys will get at the end of this webinar. We'll send it out by email, so don't worry, those are captured. I just don't want to read through them in front of you today since we have so much to cover. But the first lesson in the kids course, the elementary age course, gives an overview of zoonoses and how they relate to humans and animals. And as you can see, again, words and concepts are simpler. I don't have any videos for the younger kids, but just a few screenshots of things that you'll see. So one of the important concepts is to learn what the word zoonoses is and what it means. So here we have kind of a hangman type game that can be played to learn that. In this lesson, youth will also learn about the 4 different germs, so bacteria, viruses, fungi, and parasites. And they kind of have fun names for the kids to help them remember. There's Freddie the Flu, and Sam and Ella, Nash the Rash, which is ringworm. And then we go through and a couple of animals tell a story about themselves, describing their clinical signs. And students can use that information about the germs that they learned to decipher which germ caused the animal to get sick. In lesson 2, youth will learn about signs and symptoms in their animals and in people when they're sick and what to do. So this is an example of some of that course content. Students will walk through the signs and the images that people and animals might exhibit when they're sick. So they click on each of these different checkboxes. And then after they go through that, there's 2 multiple choice activities. So students can test their knowledge about naming signs that are seen in a possibly infected animal and select precautions and steps to take when faced with an infected animal. Who do they tell? Things like that. The topics in lesson 3 educate youth on the different modes of the transmission of germs and ways to stop them from spreading. So we cover the different routes of transmission, again, kind of simplifying it to this 4 ways that germs can spread: touch, air, hand to mouth, and bugs. The lesson activity asks students to drag and drop correct modes of transmission to its matching picture. So how this kind of works is it goes through each of these in a little more detail. You click on that thing and it says how to prevent spreading by air, and it has a couple of pictures and examples. In lesson 4, we talk about the different ways to prevent disease. So we have an acronym called WASH, which is Wash, Avoid, Safety, and Health. There's a hand washing video, so students learn how to properly wash their hands, and they have a sing-along with Hammy the Pig to learn another fun hand washing song, and then learn some other helpful tips about staying sanitary when handling animals. Again, there's a little bit of a kind of quiz question too, so they have another activity that's similar to that stall cleaning activity, but it talks about putting the steps of proper hand washing in order. And the activity plays the hand washing song that they just learned. So again, students can get a sense of how long they should be hand washing for. And then at the end of this lesson 4, students have this fun game where they need to navigate Super Hammy to catch healthy foods or supplies. So boots or gloves or hand washing while trying to avoid the germs that are flying around. So they win the game after gathering 5 healthy foods or supplies, and with each healthy activity they catch, there's a quick reminder about why that activity is helpful for disease prevention. If they get caught by a germ, they have to start over, but they do get the opportunity to play it again. I thought this game was sort of tricky. When I did it, it definitely took me a few tries. Kids are probably much better at navigating around flying objects on computer screens than I am, but hopefully, kind of breaks it up and makes it a little fun and interesting. Lesson 5 is all about biosecurity. So the definition, how germs can get in, and kind of tying in those methods, those routes of transmission again. And then we have another acronym for how you can whack away germs that has to do with biosecurity. So that WAC means watch for sickness in your animals, stay away. The A is for away from sick animals, be clean, and then know about your animal's health. And then in this lesson 2, youth will be able to explore PPE by dressing up a person and trying to figure out what to use when working with infected animals. And then again, there's the biosecurity game, kind of like apples to apples, where it's similar to the one from the middle and high school course, but simpler. And then the final lesson in this kids course is a case study focused on application of the content learned. And then it also includes some information about different jobs that are important in solving the case. So in this one, the case is about an exhibitor named Sarah and her pig Pancake. And so the students click these little tabs at the bottom to read through all the evidence and the symptoms that or the signs that Pancake had while at home and at the fair. And they get to learn about other animals and other people at the fair and what's happening while they're there. And then at the end of the lesson, after they've kind of gone through all of this, the students collect clues again from the different adults that worked through the case study and then put together the clues to decide how the case started and how it was spread throughout the fair. So to solve the case again, students have to identify what spread the germ, how the germ spread, and who was the germ. Was it Freddie the flu, or was it Ash the rash that made everybody sick? So we've kind of whizzed through the content of these lessons, but I thought that was important to kind of, for you guys to know what you would be teaching these youth and what these lessons are all about and how the high school course is different from the elementary school course. One thing I want to mention that we think has been really important and one of the most critical things to our success with this program is throughout our educational material, we maintain that message that showing or interacting or both with animals is a good thing. So it can be tricky sometimes to share these disease prevention messages, and there are bad diseases that can affect humans and animals, and sometimes that can be scary, and it's a little hard to present that in a way that doesn't make it seem like it's bad to interact with animals. So we've really tried to put an emphasis on that. We want this interaction to occur. We just want it to occur in a safe and healthy manner. So we definitely don't want to discourage or scare anyone away from working with animals, so you won't see any of those messages in this course, which is obviously really important for many of our 4-H youth. Like I mentioned earlier, both courses are fully accessible, which is important if you are interacting with any youth with disabilities. We found, or there's been data that says that many students with disabilities also prefer online courses over face-to-face courses. So we have made efforts to make both courses fully accessible. And as you can see on the screen, both the course website, which we'll explore more in a little bit, and the courses themselves are also responsive on different mobile devices. When visiting the course website, you'll find that there's a variety of materials designed to fit these two courses and learning objectives as well. So the learning objective worksheets, or the learning objectives that you saw, are populated onto worksheets that the youth can use directly. We also have keys for those that are available on a password protected portion of the website for teachers and leaders and educators, and I'll give you guys the password a little bit later, as well as in the email I will send you after this training. But these are some of the different resources that supplement the content very directly of the course. We also, for the high school course, have, for the middle high school course, we have PowerPoints that are available, and those can cover the course lessons in a classroom setting if a leader or a teacher wants to use kind of a more traditional method of presenting the information. It's exactly the same content. Of course, it won't have those moving components and more of those interactive things, but it's the same exact learning objectives and the same content. Some additional supplemental materials that are available are a couple more lesson worksheets, and those also have keys available. So one of these is shown on the slide, and it's a routes of transmission worksheet where kids have to match different ways to prevent disease transmission with the route of transmission that it is targeting. And so we have a couple of those that are available. Also available is signage, like this customizable stall sign. And so students can download that and populate it with their information and a photo, hang it on their stall at the fair. And then we also include a related resources section, which includes additional disease education resources, biosecurity tips, other agriculture-related learning activities from various reputable sources. Many of them have also been a part of this overarching youth and agriculture project through these grants from CBC and CSTE. So now the kind of second fun part of this entire suite of materials, we have a huge emphasis on these online courses, which are great in teaching these foundational, really important concepts. But we also have hands-on activities that we've developed and we've, taken and adjusted and made them our own from other people who have used them. Some of you guys may have used similar activities in some of your outreach as well. So on our website, we have 3 different activities, and these are found under the hands-on piece of the webpage, which you guys will see in a little bit. And each of these activities, how we've designed those how-to videos and the instructor guides that are paired with them, is for use in kind of a larger or mid-sized group setting. But as you will see in coming slides, we've also brainstormed some ideas in ways that you guys can implement these workshops or these activities through virtual workshops or at-home student use with siblings and family, things like that. So I will go through kind of how they're designed and portrayed on the website, but know that they're definitely modifiable, definitely adjustable for scale. So the first activity that I'll cover is the disease transmission and outbreak investigation activity, or mucus swap, which is, by the way, meant to be a little bit eyebrow raising to kind of catch people's attention. So this particular activity is a great model to show the transmission of disease between animals at an exhibition. So in this activity, we have a variety of plastic cups, one for each participant in this workshop, and fill 10% of those cups with distilled water that's mixed with baking soda. So that acts as the mucus of an infected animal. And then the rest of the cups are just filled with plain distilled water. And then each of these students receives a cup with a behavior card that correlates with the cup they were given. So you can see these behavior cards on the screen. And each student has one of these. And so, for example, the one on the right that says participate in multiple open shows, county fair and state fair, swap fluids at least 6 times spaced evenly throughout the 5 minutes of the activity. So that behavior card will be paired by the workshop organizer with one of the cups that has the baking soda in it. And so that will be an infected cup, but the students don't know that. All of them look like clear liquids. And so they go throughout this activity, and as you can see, they're supposed to swap fluids at least 6 times. So they go through the group and mix their liquid together with others. There's more detailed instructions on this in a instructor guide, which you can see here pictured on the screen. And this one also has a participant guide for users to help them explain what they're supposed to be doing as well. And then at the end of the activity, we drop phenol red into each student's cup, just a couple drops. And after mixing that up, they either get a color change, which means that they're infected. Their liquid turns either a bright pink or a faint pink. And then if there's no color change, they've not been infected. So then after that comes the outbreak investigation piece, where you kind of work through the activity and work backwards to decide who was the original carrier of disease. So that's kind of how that activity works, and it's a little bit more involved, but really fun, really makes kids think. They like the outbreak investigation part. They like making fun of each other for whoever was infected. And so we found that kids really like that activity. Like I mentioned, that's kind of a mid or larger size group. We find it works best with about 10 people for the phenol red, but this is certainly something that could be implemented with online trainings for them to be able to do at home with their siblings or things like that. And one of the most difficult obstacles that kids might face in these kind of applications is a lack of materials. So food coloring can be substituted if phenol red isn't available. You just use, for the infected cups, they have blue food coloring, and the remaining cups have yellow food coloring. And so as they get mixed together, the darker green ones have a more severe infection, and the lighter green cups have a less severe infection. So you still get the point of disease spread and how multiple swaps or multiple shows and fairs and exhibitions increase your risk of being infected or being more severely infected. Some other ideas is if you do want to, put together little packets or kits that students could check out in your county, then you could facilitate that, and that might be a way to apply it a little differently than how we have it outlined on the website. Our next activity is a disease transmission and biosecurity activity. So this particular activity demonstrates how zoonotic diseases are spread to you or your animals on the farm or at exhibitions, and we use GlowGerm to model the spread of germs. Some of you may have heard of this. It's a really cool thing that is available, on Amazon or a variety of different places. And how we do this activity is we sprinkle glow germ on various things before participants arrive. So we usually put a little strip by the door that they're going to be coming in to. We put some on an animal, a stuffed animal, brushes, other tack items, feed bags or buckets. We usually use a bag of popped popcorn to kind of show human food as well. And then we have the students come in. We can do it a couple different ways based on the age group of the audience. For the older kids, a lot of times we do a pass the pig game where we have the stuffed pig and everybody introduces themselves while they're holding the pig and then throws it to someone else. So that's what we do with the older kids. With the younger kids, we might have them prepare for a show. So they'd inspect the stuffed animals, mix feed, prepare tack, things like that. And then after they've done all this, they've been handling the stuffed animals, they've walked through the door, they've mixed up this feed, and then you turn off the lights and turn on the black light, and they can see how the glow germ has gotten absolutely everywhere. It's on their hands, it's on their faces, on the bottom of their shoes. They can see it tracked through the room. And so you talk about how easily germs can spread. You tell them the few places that this glow germ started, and now they can see how it's everywhere. And again, this is a big hit with kids. It's really funny to them to see everything that's glowing on themselves and on the stuffed animals, and whose faces have been lit up with the glow germ. So another thing you can do with this activity is emphasize the importance of proper hand washing. So if you have glow germ on people's hands, you ask them to go wash their hands, come back, and then take another look with the black light, and you can see how, the spots they missed and how proper hand washing to fully clean all the germs from their hands after working with animals or after working with potentially contaminated surfaces or items is really important. Another way to implement this activity is by having students wear PPE so they can handle these materials and do the activities wearing gloves, for instance, and then have the students remove the PPE and look at their hands. So they could see that the gloves are contaminated. And then after they remove, there's a couple different things that are shown. One is how protective PPE is as one method of preventing disease transmission, but also that it's usually not totally foolproof, and you might still have a little bit of the glow germ or the germs on your hands. And so proper hand washing is still important, paying proper attention to how you put on that PPE, how you wear it, and how you take it off. So again, this one is something that glow germ's not exactly a common household item. So you may wish to put together some kits or packets for kids to check out and use with their families. Another idea is to use glitter or glitter glue, which that can get pretty messy as well, but that works similarly in how it spreads from place to place. The difference is they can of course see it spreading, but it still hits on the main concepts. Our final activity that we have how-to guides for and demonstration videos is a personal protective equipment or PPE activity. So this demonstrates the importance of PPE, again, hand washing as well. So I'm not going to run through this by talking at you guys again, because I want to show you one of our videos that we have available on our website.
In this video, we will describe how to use personal protective equipment, or PPE, and shaving cream to perform a hands-on disease transmission activity. This activity is designed to explain the importance of PPE. The activity guide with discussion questions can be found on bluenotflu.org.
You can kind of get the idea of what is happening here. So we have a little bit of an introduction, and then we have on the screen kind of a few words of materials needed, about how many you need per participant. And then I wish it worked, but maybe I'll show you guys on the website in a little bit. It goes through the whole activity and kind of makes it a little bit more interesting and engaging than either reading the instructor guide or having you guys narrate that from the instructor guide to the kids. Okay, and then this one is maybe a little easier to implement at home or through an online training, something like that during this time of more digital interactions, because these materials can actually be common household items. So students can use any PPE they have available at home. So this might include rubber boots, apron, short gloves, things like that. So we use, the official PPE in this video and this activity guide, like Tyvek suits and plastic boot covers. But that isn't, that doesn't really make the activity any better. So we encourage you to demonstrate this if you hold an online training or meeting, or you can share that demonstration video from the Blue Not Flu website, and kids can do that at home with whatever they have available. So now that I've described kind of what the course is and what we have available for these hands-on activities, I wanted to talk a little bit about integrating them together. So again, these courses can be taken by anyone at their own time. We also have those options for delivering it in the classroom via the PowerPoint presentations. But what we've found to be the most successful is integrating those together. So the students take the online course ahead of time, and then we reinforce those concepts through these hands-on activities. And I should mention, if I didn't already, that those instructor guides that are available for each of these activities have discussion questions, and in the instructor guide for the mucus swap activity, they have some answers as well. Actually, all of them do have answers with them too. The participant guide for the mucus swap activity doesn't have those included, so that the students don't get to see those ahead of time, but those discussion questions will help you relate the content back to the course content from those online lessons. So for example, what we've done a lot in the past is held workshops at state 4-H events where we've required participants to complete that online course before participation in the workshop, and then provide proof of completion with the certificates that I mentioned. And then they come in, and when the students have that basic knowledge of zoonoses prevention and other things, it really lets us be more interactive, kind of role play in those disease investigation scenarios. And the students do a great job of answering questions and figuring out how these hands-on activities relate to what they've learned. So we have this trainer's guide document available on our website. So hopefully I'll be able to pull this up for you guys to see. And this talks about a few different options that are available for integrating these together. This kind of provides a little bit of an introduction, which is some of the information about the course, some general ideas for how to implement it, using it during club meetings, things like that. And then a little bit of planning tips. So some things that are available, the instructor guides, participant guides for some of those activities. And then to tie in the course material, you may want to use those worksheets, the learning goals worksheets, those additional worksheets. And then we have these 3 different options. So, if you're able to have your students complete independent learning ahead of time at a workshop, and you can, for example, send your students a link and have them do the online course ahead of time, and then have them email you the certificates of completion, and then do the hands-on activities during the workshop. And so we have some suggested class and workshop times. And then there's a couple other options that we have available. So option 2 is if you can expand it or hold it multiple times. So we help you out with matching the different hands-on activities to the lessons. So for example, you may wish to have them complete lessons 1 through 3 and then do the PPE activity or something like that. So I actually lied, it's 5 pages, but hopefully this is a tool to help you facilitate some of the integration of these hands-on activities with the online course. We have some kind of sample agendas that you can hopefully just copy and paste, use how you want to with what works in your setting. And then again, we have that lesson activity correlation guide where we match up the different lessons that fit best with the different activities. Another thing I wanted to talk about is that our course has been pretty rigorously reviewed. So both the course for elementary students and the middle and high school students version have both passed Iowa and National 4-H peer review. and they align with Iowa and national 4-H program priorities in the areas of healthy living and STEM. And they also align with Iowa core and national education standards. So if this is a thing that you really want to emphasize, or if you are working with ag teachers in your county and they would like to make sure that it meets some of these educational standards that they're trying to achieve in their class, we have met many of these standards that are listed, or all of the standards that are listed on this slide. And then of course, we think it helps to teach these important 4-H life skills too. So healthy lifestyle choices, disease prevention, personal safety, critical thinking, problem solving, planning and organizing, and then communication skills as well. For you Iowa 4-H County Youth Coordinators, we have a 4-H at-home to-go lesson that, or a couple of them actually, that we've developed that relate very nicely to these resources that I've been covering in the online course and the hands-on activities. And so these will be available in the extension store. You guys probably have been here, so if you just click on 4-H Youth Development and County Program Resources, here's a screenshot of the current 4-H at home to go lessons. And so by next Friday, June 5th, you'll see another couple up there that relate very well to the activities that we've outlined so far in this webinar. And so check back and you can use those in your county for youth that you're reaching out to. I also wanted to talk about kind of relating this to topics outside of showing and exhibiting animals. So that's really important to a lot of our 4-H youth and to us. And again, we want to make sure that it's encouraged. But this is all about biosecurity and disease prevention and things that are really applicable beyond just taking your animal to a fair. So definitely we encourage you to be flexible when you integrate these resources into youth education that you lead. For example, although zoonotic diseases are emphasized in the course, the biosecurity principles are also applicable to control of foreign animal diseases like African swine fever or avian influenza. So youth may be curious about this, they may be hearing about it in the news or from their parents, and so you can definitely apply those concepts as well. Again, like the course material is mainly focused on preventing the spread of diseases among animals and between humans and animals. Students can learn the importance of taking preventive measures to stop the spread of diseases among humans too. So this is obviously very applicable to our current time and to COVID-19. So, you saw as we kind of went through some of those lessons, people wearing face masks, that'll be relatable to kids. They'll see that and they'll recognize that the disease transmission methods or the routes and the methods to prevent them are applicable to human diseases as well. I have flattened the curve up there. So for instance, the disease transmission and outbreak investigation mucus swap activity, one of the things that you go through after you add that phenol red indicator to everybody's cups, you have to trace back and try to figure out who was the original source of the infection. And so they draw an epi curve in that activity. So when students understand kind of from beginning to end what is represented by this curve, they have the opportunity to model it, then phrases like flatten the curve become more meaningful and actionable. So definitely make it relevant, be flexible. Disease prevention measures like the protective items caught by Super Hammy in that game in the elementary course can emphasize lessons on well-being. We cover, everyday life skills like proper hand washing. So those really have a place in almost any health or science-based curriculum or outreach event. So please be creative and use it to fit your needs. The free online courses can be used in a variety of ways by anyone or anywhere, like I've mentioned. And so a few of the things that we've kind of suggested for application of this material is to educate in classrooms or clubs, have ag or science teachers incorporate those lessons and learning objectives into their classrooms. Students can use it as preparation for animal science skillathons, exhibitions, other contests. You could encourage 4-H clubs to have local competitions for most certificates achieved by members, or counties or states could use these courses as a part of animal or veterinary science awards requirements. We also have proposed it as an option for requiring completion of this course before exhibition at a fair. So there's a variety of opportunities for students to use this and for you to encourage students to learn about biosecurity and disease prevention, which really just will benefit everyone. I mentioned that evaluation process, that Google survey earlier on in this presentation. And so to measure the effectiveness of the online courses and those hands-on activities, we use a simple evaluation. In the online course, we just have one evaluation that's given after the student finishes the course. So the reason why that was done is we wanted to eliminate the need to match those pre and post course responses so that the surveys could remain anonymous and non-identifiable. And then not having to match those and maintain user information makes it decreased maintenance on our side and on the IT side to be able to maintain that. So that helps to keep those courses free of charge as well. But we do ask students to report their knowledge and behavior before taking the course versus after. We ask them a little bit of information about their animal experience, their future career plans, and then we have versions of this as well for classes or workshops that don't utilize that online course. We have hard copy versions that are on the password protected area of the site. And the reason why we have this and what we've learned from them is we try to collect some information about motivation of youth. So we've learned that youth are more motivated to change their behavior when they know it will make their animal healthier as opposed to themselves, which was a really interesting finding. And then we collect information about the efficacy of the course as well. So we have found it to, the survey results have shown that there's been an increase in reporting of kids always completing desirable behaviors, and then a decrease in students reporting never completing desirable behaviors. So we found some things that we think are good and that these concepts are being taught and understood, but we collect areas for improvement as well, opportunities for where we think further education is needed. We ask about, for example, what are your reasons for not hand washing? Is it because hand washing facilities aren't available? You don't feel like your hands are dirty? So we do try to figure out what our next steps are and what we can improve on to make this youth education even better. We also ask about their favorite and least favorite parts of the course to kind of help improve as well. So we're getting near the end of this PowerPoint presentation, so I want to make sure I show you guys the website. So this is the new website that we have just released. If any of you guys have visited our website in the past, we had most of the same content. We've developed a little bit more since our old version of the site, but we have a little bit more user-friendly appearance now, and I think a little more visually appealing. Everything is on one page except for the password protected teacher area, which I've referenced. So we have these navigations at the top. We have a little bit of information about the course itself and how it can be used. And then here, scrolling onto this part, is the self-guided online courses themselves. So here is the one for elementary school students. You click take the course and it should open up in its own tab. See, there's that thing that asks me, would you like to resume where you left off? And I can jump right back to wherever I was. And then kind of in a collapsible menu under each of these lessons, we have all of those supplemental material that I talked about. So the learning objectives worksheets, the extra worksheets for comparison charts, transmission routes, things like that, and then the associated PowerPoints, the glossaries that I mentioned that are also a part of the online course, and things like the stall signs are there. There's that accessible version. If you just want to download everything, we have a zip file for you here. And then here's those hands-on activity videos. So
in this video, we will describe how to use personal protective equipment, or PPE, and shaving cream to perform a hands-on disease transmission activity. This activity is designed to explain the importance of PPE. The activity guide with discussion questions can be found on bluenotflu.org. This activity will take about 5 minutes to set up and will take about 10 minutes to complete. You may complete this activity with any number of participants. Hard floors and a trash bag will make cleanup easier. If possible, it is also beneficial to be near a bathroom, sink, or hand washing station. To set up this activity, you will need the following supplies: shaving cream and PPE such as coveralls, gloves, shoe covers, and face masks. Only one set of PPE is necessary, but having several sets is beneficial to allow multiple participants to wear the PPE. It is best if not all participants have PPE, but rather just a few volunteers, so that most participants can observe. Once you are ready to begin the activity, ask at least one volunteer to come to the front of the room to dress in PPE. The more PPE they put on, the better the demonstration will be. You may wish to explain that the volunteers pretend they're a veterinarian or animal health technician, and they're going to a farm, examining an animal and collecting samples, and that the shaving cream represents body fluids from the animal, such as saliva, blood, or manure, which all could be contaminated with a pathogen. Once dressed, ask the volunteers to cup their hands together while you fill their hands with shaving cream. Encourage them to rub the shaving cream around on their hands. Next, ask the volunteers to remove the PPE. It is best to not offer guidance or strategies for removing PPE and allow the volunteers to think through that on their own. As volunteers remove their PPE, encourage observers to notice whether any shaving cream is getting on the volunteer's skin, clothing, floor, etc., and discourage volunteers from wiping away if that occurs. Once all participants are able to see the challenge of removing PPE without spreading a potential pathogen, allow volunteers to be seated. Conclude the activity by covering the items under Discussion in your instructor guide. For more information and additional activities, visit bluenotflu.org.
Okay, so that kind of gives you a sense of what the videos are like. That one is a little on the shorter side, 2:35, but they're all, I think, under 5 minutes or close to it anyways. So we, again, have those instructor guides available for you. Here we have a workshop materials section for youth leaders and educators. So this is something that the youth wouldn't be using. They may use the hands-on activity pieces themselves. Hopefully they will use the online course piece. So this is more for you or for other leaders that may be implementing these with youth in their area. So there's that trainer's guide that I covered earlier with the different options depending on how much you can communicate with these youth ahead of time and how much time you have. We have a sample workshop flyer that's kind of just a, you fill it in if you're going to have a workshop, post it, have your information, and that we've really tried to make it easy for you. Here's that related resources section. So there's different disease education, biosecurity tips for swine exhibitors, and then other agriculture-related learning activities that are available. Here we have the password protected area. So are you a parent, advisor, club leader, or instructor? That's the section you'll want to go to. We have a little bit of information on the main page here, those curriculum standards that I covered earlier, and then some information about the project background, which I covered at the beginning of this presentation. Just why is it important, and where did it come from, this activity? And the answer to that is those influenza outbreaks. So if you click on access, on the slide that I was just jumped away from, in the PowerPoint was the password, and it's YIAGPASS. So Youth in Ag Pass, YIAGPASS. And so we have a similar page, but it says instructor page at the beginning. And so here we have all the keys or the answers to those learning goals. Again, you can download them all in a zip file if you want them all. And then we have some resource guides for both the elementary course and the middle and high school course, which show basically how these all tie together. So again, we have the videos matching up with the different lessons and where the best fit is for those, and all the learning objectives and the affiliated worksheets kind of all together in one place if you want to go through it lesson by lesson. And then we have those printed evaluations that I mentioned earlier, and those are available on the site as well. So that is the website, and those are the materials that are available. And again, I will email you guys this along with the digital packet. So this is kind of a collection of pretty much everything that is available already on the website, but hopefully just an easy way for you to have it all in one place. And those 4-H at home to go lesson templates will be linked there as well. And so I'll be emailing that to you afterwards. I'll include the password so you guys can get into that portion if you want to. And I'll mention with you guys some of the feedback that the kids give us too when we ask them what do they like about the course. Really about 80% of the kids, which especially sometimes, you know, clicking through online courses can be a little boring for them. And so this relates just to the online course and not those hands-on activities. But about 80% of the kids really give very positive feedback on the course. The negative feedback that we receive is sometimes some kids think it's a little long. Some kids think it's a little easy, so it just depends kind of on their background and what they know already. But the vast majority of the feedback has actually been quite good, which we're really pleased about. Some of the goals of this material is to, again, foster those partnerships between animal and public health, and really having that interaction occur between youth, between their parents, other adult volunteers or youth specialists. Again, promote youth involvement in animal agriculture. And then finally, of course, increase disease prevention practices and reduce zoonotic disease risks. So I want to acknowledge all the different people that have contributed to this project. It certainly hasn't been my efforts solely. And so I want to acknowledge the different veterinarians of the Center for Food Security and Public Health. So my colleagues, Dr. Abby Cannon and Dr. Kristen Obank, worked with me in the first several years of the project. And so we've had them as well as several student employees that have been integral to developing this material. And then of course, thank you to the Iowa Department of Public Health, the CDC and CSTE for their funding. And then all of these different reviewers that you see on the slide, National Pork Board, National 4-H, Iowa 4-H, ISU Extension and Outreach, FFA. And then again, thank you so much to Dr. Andrew Henenfant, Dr. Amy Powell, Dr. Danelle Biggett-Weddle. My student currently, Hope Dolman, she did a ton of work in the last couple of weeks helping to pull this together. You guys can see the youthandag@iastate.edu web email address, so that'll reach me and anyone else involved with the project at the time. So feel free to reach out if you have any questions or ideas, and then be expecting an email from us later today, hopefully, about the digital packet that we'll have for you guys, and the password will be included in that as well. So thanks again so much for everybody's attendance. Great to see you here on the webinar.